And so I also did some work on characterization of explosives, because the Navy, especially the White Oak and now the Indian Head Lab, were known for putting more explosives in the field than any other labs, and still have done that. And
can you describe, within the classification permitted, what explosives you were working with at the time?
Yeah, we were looking at a variety of them. One of them is TATB, which is not a very powerful one compared to others. We were looking at HMX-based. The organic names are really long and difficult, so it's no value. We all just use the simple acronyms. And TNT was still being used in that time. So we were studying TNT as well. It turns out that the form of the explosive like TNT, whether it's a melt cast or it's pressed, changes its properties. And so we needed to understand that, because if you were going to use the material, just because it was called TNT didn't mean it had the properties you thought. You had to characterize it much more. And this was not well understood by non-explosive
are you
people.
saying that, if you had a lot of TNT, I mean, I'm just making it simple, but if you had a lot of TNT and part of it was subjected to a shock wave, then the properties of that part of the TNT would be different than what you expected?
If the TNT was pressed, it would take less pressure to set it off, whereas if it was cast as a single crystal almost, or at least, then you had to actually hit it a lot harder. So you could have what you'd call duds if you didn't know what you were doing in filling an explosive. You could find out that you tried to set it off and it wouldn't do anything.
Okay, so you use the shock wave actually to prepare filler material?
What we would do is actually characterize what would be called it's called a failure diameter. It's if you're not above a certain diameter, it will not detonate. And usually those are reasonably small, but on some of them there can be inches, and these days it's even more. So that means you have something that's going to be very hard to set off unless you have what's called a booster, something to put the shock wave in that is a large diameter. It just won't work. And
so that's why we have the primaries, and then
that's why we have these other explosives, and to make sure that we can get the less sensitive explosives to actually perform, because there's a whole range of properties or shock wave values and sizes that just will not work in some of these explosives. And that's very important to anyone wanting to use explosives.